Okay, let's dive into the story of the world's deadliest infectious disease. But here's the thing. This isn't a story about some unstoppable superbug. It's a story about a curable disease that we, as a global community, have essentially chosen not to cure. You've probably heard of tuberculosis, or TB, but most of us don't really grasp its true scale. Get this. It kills more people than any other single infectious agent on the planet. And it does this even though we've had effective treatments for decades. That right there, that's the central, absolutely stunning paradox we're going to explore.
So you have to ask, right? Why? How can a preventable, treatable disease still be so deadly? Well, according to John Green's book, Everything is Tuberculosis, the answer isn't something you're going to find in a lab. It's found in the stories we tell ourselves, the histories we choose to ignore, and the very real choices we make every day.
So let's start by digging into this deadly paradox head-on. We're going to unpack the clues that explain how a disease we know how to cure can still be such a relentless killer all over the world. Our first clue, it's all about understanding where TB actually thrives. And spoiler alert, this is not an equal opportunity disease. It's a social disease. It finds its perfect home in the cracks of our societies, feeding on injustice and inequality.
It really starts with the absolute basics. Things like poverty and malnutrition. They just weaken the body's immune system, making a person way more likely to get a TB infection that then becomes an active, dangerous disease.
And then you've got the environment itself. Remember, TB is airborne, so overcrowded living spaces, homes with poor ventilation, that's the perfect breeding ground. It lets the bacteria spread from person to person with terrifying ease.
And the final piece of this puzzle? The system. When healthcare is broken, underfunded, or just plain out of reach, people can't even get a diagnosis. And even if they're lucky enough to get one, the months of consistent, uninterrupted treatment they need to be cured, it's often just impossible.
So you see how this all connects? It's not just one thing. It's this awful, vicious cycle. Poverty, bad housing, weak healthcare, they all feed into each other, creating a trap. And these were the exact conditions that define the world for millions, including a person named Henry, whose story is really at the heart of the book. Now, to really get why these conditions exist where they do, we need to pull back and look at a map. Not just a map of today, but one that shows the long, dark shadows of the past.
And what you see here, it's a difficult truth, but it's absolutely crucial. The map of countries with a high burden of TB today lines up almost perfectly with the map of 19th and 20th century colonialism. Places that were subjected to extractive policies were often left with health systems that were weakened on purpose. A legacy that directly shaped the kind of under-resourced clinic where a patient like Henry would have been treated.
And that brings us to our third big clue. The gap between having a cure in a bottle and actually getting that cure to a patient. That is not a medical failure. It's a policy failure. It's a failure of investment and, frankly, a failure of imagination. I mean, just look at the difference here. The reason a TB patient in a fancy Paris hospital has a better outcome than one in a crowded clinic in Freetown isn't about the medicine. It's about geography, wealth, and political will. It's about whether we choose to build the systems needed to deliver the cures we already have. And make no mistake, this neglect has consequences for every single one of us. Because when treatments get interrupted by these broken systems, the bacteria can evolve. This is what fuels the rise of multi-drug resistant strains of TB, the exact kind that afflicted Henry. As you can see from this chart, these much harder to treat strains are a growing threat to the whole world. So, once we've assembled all these clues, the social injustice, the historical legacies, the policy failures, we can finally understand the book's central, incredibly powerful idea. Now that phrase actually comes from a 19th century doctor who felt like he was seeing the disease everywhere he looked. But the meaning here is metaphorical. It means that TB is a barometer. It's a way to measure a society's real concern for its most vulnerable people. Let's break that down, because it's so important. Sure, the tuberculosis bacillus is a bacteria, but the tuberculosis epidemic, that's a social creation. The disease shows up in the lungs, but what it really reveals are the fault lines in our global community. It shows us who gets left behind, who is considered disposable, and where our systems are just fundamentally broken. And what that means is the solution can't just be a pill in a bottle. To really truly end TB, we have to go way beyond a purely medical approach. We have to fight the things that allow it to thrive in the first place: poverty, inequality, stigma, chronic underinvestment, and the ongoing legacies of history. At the end of the day, this isn't just about a disease. It's about what that disease reflects back at us. So we'll leave you with this to think about. If TB is a barometer for society, A measure of our compassion and our justice? What is it telling us about the world we've built?